This is Motovation. I'm Laurie Joy Kingwell.
And I'm Krissy Van. We're two dreamers on two wheels inspired by our community.
And celebrating the voices we're just lucky enough to discover along the ride. So if not already, like, subscribe, follow along, do what you gotta do to not miss an episode.
I'm going to get this party started then. And speaking of parties started, Laurie and I today may sound a little sexier. And that is because we spent I shouldn't say random Sunday afternoon, because we were most definitely celebrating our fellow rider friend, Nikki, but it evolved into a surprise karaoke. And we hit those high notes, didn't we?
Yeah, you did. I lost my voice to the point where I couldn't. It was just a squeak that came out by the end.
Which was so worth it.
Oh,
but
yeah.
Today is a conversation that Laurie and I have talked about broaching several times with a strong understanding that it needs to be discussed the right way. And before we get into it, we are going to be talking about body image. And if for whatever reason, this may be a triggering conversation for you, if it's something that you have personally struggled with. And I know that especially when we speak to exercise and weight loss conversations, eating disorders can come to mind. So just a bit of a trigger warning if this maybe isn't the right convo for you. Don't worry, we have lots of fun off-roads to lighten up your mood and brighten up your day. But the reason why I wanted to talk about this now, at time of recording, it's the beginning of April. And I hopped on to my Instagram yesterday and saw no less than 3 posts of people that I knew that got their workout in on a Sunday. And it said, getting my summer body ready. One of them even said crunch time because the weather's now turned nicer. And that is becoming the sole focus or motivator in their exercise spaces. On the flip side of that, a couple of weeks ago on TikTok, this filter called Bold Glamour came out. And we're no strangers to filter at this point. It kind of started with Snapchat, where everyone was a dog, and those were fun and funny. But now with
What was a dog?
It's true.
It's true.
I doubt there's
we made a
anyone
big
listening.
leap. Yeah, that's a big leap to where we've taken filters. Yeah.
It's true. It started off hilarious. You're like, now I'm a cat, meow. But quickly it evolved into ones that were brushing up our appearance. And at first they were pretty dodgy. Like, I understand that some people would use them, but you're like, your face isn't even recognizable underneath that. It's not even a representation of what you look like. And yet still people quite enamored to go forth and use them. And I get it. Like, sometimes you're hopping on and you might use social media for your job or daily life. And like for me right now, I've not washed my face. I've got mascara underneath. I can understand the appeal. However, this one Bold Glamour had me go, whoa, because if you saw as well within the last couple of months, those AI pictures. And the thing that was so funny when they came out is that people would post them and the comments, if you read a comments thread underneath and people were like, you look amazing. You look fantastic. Wow, what a superhero, which is giving your body these pings of positive reinforcement. But then at what point do you realize that's actually not me? And then furthermore, with Bold Glamour, now facial mapping has gotten so accurate. And so when they're layering a filter on your face, it's mapping so well to your face. So the Bold Glamour filter looks a lot like the person a lot of the time. And it airbrushes any flaws or texture out of the face. The makeup is contoured. The lips not overly done, but like that little bit of plump. The eye makeup on. It's been used 34 million times. It's one of the highest trending filters. And this is where I say the body image conversation has to come to the forefront, because we're on an unhealthy track where if you show up as you are, you get this feeling it's not good enough. And we already had this problem before all of these tools existed. And so I think it's just exacerbating how people feel to such a large degree. And we're becoming so warped as to what is, or if we show up as we are, that it isn't good enough, that we almost have to apologize for it, saying, oh, sorry, I haven't done this or that to myself. So as we roll into the season where people start cutting for the summer, and then mixed in with, who knows, like now with FaceTune, people are manipulating their bodies endlessly. Like what you are seeing is such a strong lack of representation, often of people you even know. It's mental diet time is what we need to be focusing on. Fuck the physical diet, but let's talk about the mental diet that you're ingesting, because I guarantee it's fucking up how you feel physically.
For women, it's just pounded into us at all angles. But when we were growing up, through really television, magazines, especially magazines, was kind of the big target where we got targeted through, I guess. And from this youngest of age, I remember it was so drilled into us around the weight you should be, the body image you should be, all the things. I remember even being a little girl, about 10 years old, 11 years old, and I was in my little pink bodysuit in ballet class, and it was just a little round thing, and I had a little kid's body, and I should have had that. I had the body I should have had. But I remember even standing there trying to suck in, because standing sideways and looking at all the other little girls, and I even had, such an awareness even at that time. And it was younger than that, but that was just kind of one of my first really predominant memories of being very, very critical of my body and that I should have abs. I remember being like, next year I'm going to have abs. I was like 10 going on 11. Like, what are you on about? But that's because other little girls that were skinny, tiny, and that was what was pushed upon us even that young. And now fast forward until the teenage years, and we talk about the magazines and all the, television, that sort of thing. And I remember even, boys holding you to that criteria. I remember one of my first boyfriends, I was wearing sweatpants, and he kind of stood up and he made the comment around like, oh, you had a little skin hanging over there. Just that like jarring, what? And then, eating disorders and things like that followed. And it was something that predominantly was a part of my life, my friend's life. And we weren't even to an extreme. Like, I didn't even know it was a real issue comparable to, right? Some of the extremes that we saw other girls in our community, sort of thing. And you get older, and it becomes so ingrained at you that your body is what it's actually there for, is to be a certain shape for you to be accepted or valued by the outside world. And if you're not that shape, then your value goes down. And even what a habit that I had that I still am weaning myself off of is every single morning, that's what I did, was I checked myself in the mirror to see what my value was that day and what I needed to do, or the desperate, attempts I needed to make during the day to make sure that my body turned into what it needed to turn into, so that my value stayed what it needed to be. And, obviously as a young adult, you start to realize of how unhealthy this really is, how dangerous this really is. Now, well, I guess it always was to some extent, but maybe you just start to pay more attention to it as you get a little bit older and into your 20s, of how much the talk is in and around also unhealthy this body image is, and all the above. And in some ways, it's gone into this place of like, all these different body types are valued because they're valued because they're a body, not because they fit necessarily, this sexualized agenda, and not because they are meeting these standards, but because it is a body, and all bodies are beautiful because they just are. They're all enough. So there is that big push body positive, and that's wonderful. Love that. But also what you're mentioning and speaking to, and I'm going to include the face in this because a lot of it is the face tuning. It's all the body tuning, the face tuning, the obsession around appearance. And it's out of control now. Also on the body positive isn't kind of steering the conversation enough, that we're also recognizing that what's happening with social media, what's happening with all these filters is creating this deeper illness in and around what it is that our bodies and our experience of that, I guess, is. And like, I'm not against, obviously I'm not against, or I don't think that, like I wear makeup, I've gotten Botox, like I'm not, but also I have my personal reasons around that. Everybody has their thing that they do, whether they get a haircut because they like their hair to be styled a certain way, or they color, or all these things. I don't think, I think that the body is also a representation and a way that you can express yourself, or the way in which you want to present yourself. I'm not negating from that, but the runaway train that is the misrepresentation of really like, what is our bodies for? And what is our face? Our faces are for communication and connection and expression. Our bodies are these agile machines that do so much in our day and all those things. And it is an exceptionally important thing to have a strong, healthy body. And that comes with exercise and movement and all those things. But when we're exercising or we're eating because we're not trying to honor essentially this vessel and make it appreciate it and really give it all it needs to do its best for you in a day, but instead doing it so that we walk out and we feel accepted or valued. And that's, I guess, where I say, like, it's only pushing the illness around it when we have these filters and we have all these things that really push the narrative around. Am I enough? Is this enough? Am I part of it all? Do I God forbid I get left behind and I'm, this plain Jane version of myself, because the elevation of what it is to look like a valued human being and a chosen one is so fucking ridiculous that it doesn't even look that human anymore.
It's true. Couple of points when you talk about you and the younger narrative. I remember getting ready for prom and almost everyone was doing the cabbage soup diet at the time. And you didn't even realize, like, I look back now, what that is. I mean, I'm sure it's way outdated, but what they used to do for surgery patients that needed to lose weight in a hurry. And it was this celebrated, like, yeah, we're all going to do, did you make your batch kind of thing? Not even tying in together this level of diet culture, which truthfully not only came from the societal expectations from men, but if you were raised with a mom in your household, oftentimes, and for the same reasons why they had this locked in their brain, they would often speak. It was like the perpetual mom diet. It was very, very common. And I didn't really have this light bulb moment until recently. Obviously, I've transferred my skill sets into the fitness industry. And I did an interview with this woman who has a gym based in London, who now essentially focuses on women 40 plus. And the reason why I found her is because with those women, they wanted to do some advertisements for her website, and her marketing personnel had shortlisted about 5 or 6 photos that could go up. And it's from stock imaging sites. I use them all the time for graphic design as well. And every single one of them, number one, no racial diversity. Number two, anything that was a older woman, it was like just big gray hair and the teeny tiniest 5-pound pink dumbbells, maybe. And she got really fucking pissed off. And so she decided to connect with a photographer and a UK-based stock image company and said, how about we fix this and I'll show you what real women lift. 60s, 70s, doing their bench presses, etc. But when she speaks to her community, the reason why a lot of those women of that age had such a fear over lifting weights is because cardio was the only thing they would ever go to. And it was because it was this perpetual diet. So this has been going on for such a very long time. When you speak to the face and the changes, I mean, I'm so candid about it. I'm like a skating rink Botox person, but here's the thing. For me, yeah, it makes me feel better. I don't love I have an extremely expressive face, and truthfully, without
you and I both, Krissy.
Oh, And like the muscle in my 11s, biggest one, bigger than the biceps. Like I truly, it's the Stars Trek moment when it goes rogue. And so I was like, this makes me feel better. Again, if you pare it down, it's like, why? Obviously, you're like, I don't like if this imagery of myself goes out, that other people would see it. If you really pare it down, like 100%, that's got to be part of it. But at the same time, when I think of my internal body talk, especially as somebody that I frequent the gym for mental health always, we'll break it down at some point. But currently in this conversation, we had that episode, Mountain and Off the Peak. Like I flew off the peak. Movement is the savior of my mental health. Like it's so important to move emotions, I think, by moving your body, whatever that looks like. But again, that inner body talk, when you think of your why, when you're going to participate in these activities, generally my narrative is not a negative storytelling. And this is the thing. If you're doing all these things, but the stories that you're telling yourselves, you have to remember that body you're talking about, your brain and your soul is inside of there and it's listening and it's going to ingest that. And I think if you've learned anything from listening to us this long, that's how you're talking to yourself inside, and that's the regular conversation, guess what? The regular conversation is going to continue to be about. And you brought up such a good point when you speak of our bodies and movement and exercise. Yes, 1000%. It's extremely important. But like when it comes to actually doing the movement, you really have to break down that your body is so capable. Like, I love how you you're like, it's a machine. And so you kind of have to change the conversation of this level of appreciation for what can my body do for me?
I absolutely grew up, bless her heart, but mom was always on a diet talking about her weight, still to this day. It's almost, actually over the past year and some, I'd say that it's kind of the first time in the 30 coming on 90 years that I've been alive that I haven't heard the first thing that mom says when I'm around her is like something about her weight, because it was just so drilled into her generation. Right. And, the real transition, I'd say, was I really started to exercise consistently for my mental health. It actually had nothing to do with my body at the time. And I started to understand the studies behind exercise every single day and how that quite literally is just feeding the endorphins and all the good stuff. And so I thought, I'm going to really figure this out, make this habitual thing. And I managed to do that. And what I also noticed around that same time, because there was so much illness with family members and also, the age that our parents are at, I'm watching my friends' parents and my mom have a lot of issues physically. Mm-hmm. And understanding that at our age is the age, this like 30s and 40s, where it is really kind of one of the most critical times to build muscle so that when you're older, your body's not falling apart in that same way. Like, of course, everything is going to, essentially your body's dying, if you will. At a certain point, it's, progressing and then it's regressing. But, understanding mobility, strength, all those different things. Now, so I've got the priority in my why being first and foremost my mental health. And then I start realizing that I'm really gaining strength and muscle in a way that I really haven't since I was, kind of heavily into martial arts. But I was even surpassing that because I was so consistent with it. And I felt the benefits of the mental health aspect and the boosts and the difference. And I was like, oh, this is amazing. And then all of a sudden I was better understanding just that of like what I'm doing for my future self, the benefits that are coming for it. So all my whys started to change. And then also what happened was suddenly I'm just in the best shape of my life, more so than I've ever been. And so what happened was at some kind of point, all of a sudden having this physique that I wanted so badly before, through dieting, through all those different things, back and forth over, your teens and 20s and stuff like that. All of the sudden, what starts creeping in is those unhealthy things in regards to, okay, you go have a week where you binge eat or you're whatever because you are away on holidays and this and this and that. And rather than it being like, okay, you just get back into it, suddenly now I'm obsessing because I don't have that flat stomach. I can't see my abs, blah, blah, blah. But the wonderful thing is within that is I think I really needed, and sometimes it happens in little small bits, but it not even remotely what it used to. I had to work through that because there was still so much residuals around body image. And don't get me wrong, I love when I catch it and I'm like, I have abs. I'm almost 40 and I've got abs.
Yeah.
And like, I'm stronger and I've got, So like, I'm like, I have muscles, I've got, definition and all those things, because especially as a woman, that's hard to do. And I'm not trying to necessarily do that. It's just happening because I'm consistent with it and I'm pushing myself and I'm seeing, what can I do? How much more weight can I do? Where can I go with this? All the things. But what I'm trying to say is that it was so ingrained in me for so much of my life that I think for the rest of my life, it'll always creep in. It will always pop up. But like anything that we ever speak about on every episode in some capacity is the importance of your why. And with the runaway train that's happening right now with social media and filters and all those different things, anything that you're doing with yourself, to yourself, or adjusting about yourself externally on your exterior, I think you have to really, really be conscious of like, why am I doing this? What is like the real intention? Not the like first intention. You're like, 'cause I just want to feel good. But you're like, what is your real intention? Because you can say that on the outside, but when you're like left in the bathroom naked by yourself, or every time you put on that pair of pants or that top, or every time you step out, what is your real intention? Because until you get that really in check, what is like creeping into our computers and our television still and all those different things is on steroids right now. And so you have to be so aware of the check-ins on that. And even with like the Botox that I get, every time before I get it, I'm always still checking in. And for me personally, my biggest reason right now and why, because it took me, there was a while before I was like, I that it was on my radar. I was like, okay, here's the thing. And mine was tired. I was starting to look really tired because like we just talked about, really expressive. I spent a lot of time in the sun on a hot island, all the things. And I would look in the mirror and I was like, you look like they're really tired. Like and I'm awake and I am very rested and you do not look rested. And I am hydrated. I am all the things. And so it was one of those things where I'm like, well, I want to see if this, and I'm still super expressive. I still get to have all the weird ways in which my face moves because I wasn't willing to be done with that. You know what I mean? And actually I stopped getting my crow's feet done because it was affecting my smile. My smile didn't look like my smile anymore. It didn't reach my eyes the same way. I was like, no, bring the crow's feet back. But it was a big thing where it was for me, it was like, I was looking really tired. And when I look tired, I feel tired. And so it was one of those things that it made me feel awake. And everyone has their reasons. And what your why is for anybody, for anything that you do, that's your why. But that was the why enough where I was like, am I doing this because I'm terrified that like if my beauty disappears, is my value different? It's not for me because I'm like, I value so much about myself. The fact that I am socially looked at as like a good looking human is like, okay, that's the bonus. Has it benefited me in my life? 100%. That's insanity to say, or just a lie and ignorance or whatever it is to say that hasn't. But what I'm saying is that I don't rely on that. If anything, that's, I think, part of the reason I've always been such a, kooky, because I realized very young that like people chalked you up to that, your looks. Yeah. And I was like, and I just never wanted to have that be the thing. So I was always like, I'll do ugly faces because I'll show you that that's just not, where I went pretty extreme with that. Now I rarely have a normal expression. But I just think you have to keep breaking it down. It's like, why am I doing this? And is this the version of me that I want to like share with my friends and my families and colleagues and professionally and all these different things, like the filter, even in that level of like, at some point they're going to see the real face. And I have friends that are just like, I just adore, and they are so heavy on the filters. And when I see them, I'm not even coming from a place of judgment, I'm coming just like now in my brain that has mapped their face from seeing them the last year online as this face. Now I'm seeing them in person. My brain gets actually distracted because my brain's going, that's not their face. That's a different face. That's a different face. And instead of getting to enjoy my friend and just being so in love with the fact that I'm getting to see them, subconsciously, my brain is processing that it's a different face. Even though I know that that filter is not their face, it's just what your brain does. It's a processing machine as well. And so that even in itself, do you want that to be your initial interactions with all the people that see you? Is that they are computing that this is a different face. It's a different smile. It's different eyes, it's different skin. It's different things, rather than just having appreciation for the face that you have. And if they don't appreciate it or they have judgment on it, they're not your fucking people anyways. Fuck them.
100%. I actually hear a lot of stories about that from friends in online dating. And it's interesting because it's both men and women. Like,
for sure.
Or they and them. Like, it's so true. Like the amount, I have one buddy in particular who was like, we joked, basically did the reverse catfish, where he didn't realize that he was catfishing people. But I was like, oh, you definitely are, because his photo was so fucking old. And by the time he had dreads going on and all the things, I was like, you just need to own where you're at, because so many people sat with him and they were just kind of like visibly uncomfortable, being like, what? Like, didn't expect. And I was like, it's not them, it's you. You do not have an accurate representation going out there. But I think in this conversation, we've spoken a lot to, again, I know it always comes back to the why, but especially with this aspect, when there's so many external factors that we're being fed, plus we're talking about your external, what's on display, I think that more than ever is where you need to make the inward connection. But on top of that, it's also about navigating with our people when they are struggling with this. Because for myself, it's sometimes been a little bit challenging because you almost don't know the right thing to say. And I think it's just that strong reminder that sometimes just providing the space first for someone to express, because it's so easy for us to be like, you're crazy, you're beautiful, what are you talking about? But at the end of the day,
when they're like when they're feeling discomfort within their skin,
yes,
and they're sharing that, is that what you mean?
Exactly.
Gotcha.
And so, you're automatically want to fix and just compliment, right? Which is not going to, because by the time they've said it to you outwardly, think how long that inward conversation has been going on. And perhaps that's a conversation that's been happening for decades and you just get little glimpses of it on the surface. So I think us as humans, I guess I'm sort of transitioning into a motivation maintenance by accident. But one thing I really started to try and do, because obviously I came from a television background. Truthfully, when it's speaking of body image, in my first job, and I think I've said this before, but we always would get a clothing allowance, and they would basically, two males would have us come in a room and show our outfits, like turn and be like, yay or nay kind of thing. Oh, and
gross.
They would abrasively, if it didn't work for you, there was no holding back on that. So it was a very image conscious industry. And it was something I was really cognizant of when I worked with a lot of esteemed colleagues and journalists. And the thing is that men would typically get complimented on their incredible storytelling and journalism, and women would be told, you look pretty, you're so hot, can I see your feet? Or conversely, how dare you show your arms? I was active in the industry and it just came up again, which I was like, really, this conversation's still happening? The right to bare arms became the trending thing in regards to showing your arms in a sleeveless outfit, because for some reason you weren't credible anymore if you showed your arms. So fucked up. My point of that, it's kind of an extreme example, but I made it a habit to compliment people not on their outward appearance. And again, don't compliment people for the sake of complimenting people. That's disingenuous. But if they had done something, or if I wanted to say that yellow looks amazing on you, I had somebody that just bought this fabulous dress. You want to compliment it? It's like interweave something about the human and the person underneath there, or a quality of what they're bringing to the table. Because at the end of the day, when we talk about currency, that is the currency. Social connection, how people make you feel in a room. That's the part that we generally remember.
You know, it's funny when you say the thing of like the comment, for whatever reason, this memory just popped into my head. It was a picture I posted. I guess it would have been maybe 3 years ago. It was it was motorcycle. It was my first ride of the season. We'd gone out to this cove. It was like sunset. So the sun's kind of coming down, and I have like no makeup on, just hair down. I'm sitting there, and I just had this like big smile on my face, like such a genuine moment. And that's why I posted it, because I'm also very conscious of like what I post and why I'm posting it. And I remember that was one of the things that I remember feeling so solid about, is that anyone that made a comment, they were making a comment of like how happy I looked.
Love that.
And I remember thinking that came through. Like that came through as to like what that picture was supposed to be. It wasn't supposed to be like here's a shot of me. It was like what I hope and believe social media is for myself, and what I reflect, I guess, is that social media is for like friends and family and people that care about you or genuinely interested in your life in a way that's like you want to share these moments that a piece of your world, right? Like it just felt really nice that happened to come through on social media, because so often, even if that is your intention, it becomes more about like, oh, you're so pretty, or you're so, kind of thing. And like, and I'm not saying that that's right, wrong, good, or bad. I'm just saying that it's like, a lot of times it just gets that like, I don't know, it just gets that like lost in the shuffle. And I guess it, to some degrees, I don't know, like say the right, wrong, good, or bad, healthy, not healthy, but like it is unhealthy.
Well, and I will contrast you there, because I think it's just such a good example of how our uses are different too. And again, this goes back to the why, but it's like for myself, when I think of social media, I'm like thinking of myself as a brand or a sellable entity, really, because when you break it down in the fields that I have worked in, that's what it is.
Yeah.
And so I will definitely post with intent sometimes of what's going to get a click kind of thing. And truly, like I remember when I would just post, I spend so much time in nature. If you post the trees and the mountains, you're never going to get as much leverage as if your butt's in that photo. Like that's just a fucking fact. But the thing is like, I also, and again, I'm such a micro following. It's not like I'm like, but still I've been cognizant of like, this is part of my branding as a person for a very long time. And the thing that comes with that, and why your why is so important, is because if you put yourself out publicly like that, you better be ready for the flip side that's going to come at you too. And if you
handle
aren't,
that very well when it does.
And if you are not centered going into it, like buckle the fuck up, because truly things that have been said to me, DM'd to me, could tear down a soul if you are not in the right place. And again, that's why it's so important. If you, no shame in that game. If you want to, like, there can be a lot of success, there can be a lot of money, there can be a lot of free shit and whatever the intention is behind that. But I'm like, be prepared, because if you aren't, like, that's going to rock and shatter your world if you're not centered before diving into that. So it's just like funny when you say, with depending on the intention, if people are going to put themselves out there, be ready for all the things. And then again, it's like, if you're not, then you're like, then why am I doing this? Like, to me, I'm like, that's not, that person doesn't know me. It's Van and Van City, the brand kind of thing. And again, when I'm saying that, it makes it sound, you have to understand it's for my industry. I'm not like, I'm a brand, but at the end of the day, I'm like, that's a thing in job applications. And they're like, what can we leverage from you? You know what I mean?
Yeah. They, that said though, as much as like, yeah, buckle up, you have to be ready because that's where we are as, like that's where it's at and that's coming. Do I think that, is that to say that that's not still really fucked up?
Oh, it's
that gives people, the right to target you. And, but when you do anything that puts yourself on display in any capacity, it's going to come in with judgment. So, so forth. And obviously like I have my joy in a home, social media, which is very, very different, but those are so separate from yes and no. In some ways they are completely separate from me as who I am, but it's not at the same time because everything I take in from my like everyday life and my real experience as a human is everything I plug into because it has to do with the younger version of a human that grows into the adult version of the human and why those all are so interconnected for obvious reasons. But yeah, I think it's just that of like, I guess in that motivation maintenance, you kind of talked about like how to show up for other people in that capacity or how to have a more positive body positive influence for those that are having, for the people in your lives that are having that same experience or their own experience within that world of like insecurities, self-criticisms, judgments of selves, feeling less than. I think mine of a step that you could take, and I can only give this because of my personal experience, is take the attention off. And you have to actually do this kind of all like almost like manually, mentally. You have to do this because you will constantly come back to the habitual training of thought, which is in around body image being tied to the self-worth, is constantly bring it back to the functionality. Constantly bring it back to like actually looking at my body as a machine. And that really helped me because I know, and I'm all about the fact that it's, body, mind, and soul, it's all connected. But I really had to make a separation of the body as this completely other entity before I could reattach it and have an appreciation to that degree. Even things like recognizing that, my cellulite or my wrinkles or things like that. I do have an appreciation for my wrinkles, especially around my eyes, because they're every moment I've laughed. I'm a very joyful person that loves to laugh, I like to make people laugh. I love to laugh myself. And so that is a lifetime so far of laughter. My cellulite is part of like, a lot of eating and drinking in my 20s when I gained a lot of weight. I had a great time doing it. And so it's all these different things like, yeah, was it the best thing to do in health wise? No, but like, I'm not looking to get new stuff, but all I just saying is that I try and put love towards the pieces and parts of myself that I find I have spent decades now completely ostracizing, criticizing, feeling less than because. And so recognizing that an acceptance for what is, but a focus of why it is that I have a body. What's the most important? How do I honor it, treat it, appreciate it? Not because I need to get in a swimsuit soon, not because I don't want to, look like that person, or I don't want to be devalued and, oh, well, what if they were like Laurie once had a great body? What happened? Like none of that. And I really look at it as like, if I'm really eat nutrition or take nutrition seriously, which I have as well, really got serious about the vegetable intake and all those different nutrients that I'm getting in, exercise, all those things, whatever my body then looks like thereafter is what it's supposed to look like. So if that means that, I have to buy new clothes because I have more muscle and I can't fit into my pants, then that's, I guess, what has to happen. If I say became more curvier or something like that, I don't think so. I'm built like a goddamn rectangle. But if whatever happens, okay. That's not my business. My business is honoring, treating, appreciating, feeding my body what it needs to do, building the muscle that it needs to do so it can be agile for as long as it can be. And then whatever the residual effects look like, that's cool.
Well, and it often ends up a byproduct. Like when you take care of the temple, it's like everything else falls into place, right? And it's exactly that. Like, and when I say that, it's like healthy is not a body type. Like, you know what I mean? And I think that's where we have it just really, really backwards. And again, yeah, both Laurie and myself included. It's not that we are immune to those feelings as they crop up at all, because we've all been trained for how many years. But I think it really is important to have the awareness around it. And again, like, approach others with compassion and empathy and be the ear to listen. But also, if you have somebody that comes up to you, don't let them wallow or live there either. Help them build the awareness for themselves, because it's just like, it's an interesting dichotomy, because often when people feel that way, and it's like anything in life, when you're stressed, when you're anxious, we start to then go to what can make me feel better right now. And often the taking care of the temple isn't necessarily the easiest step in the beginning. Once you're in it, it sure is, because you know how good you feel inside. You know how good you feel mentally.
Yeah.
But to help people get on that path, I think it's just important to provide the space that when it's not a good day or someone's not feeling good, don't automatically try to band-aid it with don't worry, you look great. Because I do understand that can just discount and completely invalidate what they're feeling inside. And then maybe they won't have that level of openness with you again. But help them build the awareness. And I think that we are quotable time.
Quotable time. The only other thing I'd add to that is like, get curious with them. If you really want to help in any way, you can get curious in that regard of like, you know, like, have you always kind of felt this way? Is this more recent? You know, where did these thoughts first come up? It almost always will go back to childhood, and you don't have to get that deep in it, but, or maybe they might want to, but it's also just kind of like, because sometimes we subconsciously just throw these flippant comments in and around our weight, and versus it saying, you know, like, bring it back to movement, bring it back to like, hey, do you think just getting movement around would just feel like your body would just kind of be more, you'd be more connected to your body? Like, get curious with them, you know, offer things that allow them to be more connected to their body rather than it being about reinforcing the part of body image, because that only then continues to land. Yes, you've made them, you know, like, yes, you're of value because your body is exactly how you want it to be. Well, that might make them feel good in the moment, but again, it's kind of like putting a Band-Aid on a gaping wound.
Yes, beautifully said.
So, all right, quote. Mine's Louise L. Hayes. I love her so much. Okay. You've been criticizing yourself for years and it hasn't worked. Try approving of yourself and then see what happens.
Love it. Mine is, I don't know if it's Janine Roth or Ganine Roth, because it's spelt with a G. If it's Janine, that's a really cool spelling. Anyways, you are not a mistake. You are not a problem to be solved, but you won't discover this until you're willing to stop banging your head against the wall of shaming and caging and fearing yourself.
Well, that, my friends, that is your motivation.
You've just listened to the Motovation Podcast with your host, Krissy Van, and me, Laurie Joy Kingwell.
Thanks for joining us along the ride. We've got new episodes dropping every Monday, and we're all about community. So follow us on Instagram at Motovation Podcast and visit our website at themotovation.com.
And in the meantime, tanks full and full throttle.